I recently watched a documentary called Accidental Courtesy. It's about an African American musician named Daryl Davis, who has spent over 30 years of his life befriending the most unlikely people you would ever expect: white supremacists. That's right. Not only has Daryl befriended several dozen white supremacists, but he's actually been invited to attend KKK rallies as an honorary guest. Now, to be clear, Daryl himself is not a white supremacist, nor does he condone the beliefs of his friends in the KKK. In fact, he's a strong advocate for racial equality and recognizing the influential role of African Americans in US history. So, how could this man possibly be a friend of white supremacists? From an early age, Daryl recognized that peaceful dialogue and a sincere attempt to understand one's enemies had a far greater chance of inspiring change than did fighting back with hateful words and violence. He said, "As long as we're talking, we're not fighting." So, as Daryl patiently debated the issues with his opponents, he showed care and respect for these people who only hated him because of the color of his skin. Most importantly, he let them speak, and he asked them questions, and in so doing, these white supremacists eventually ceased to hate him, and amazingly, many of them, including one of the KKK's top leaders, abandoned their racist beliefs after years of friendship with Daryl Davis. The lesson here is not a new one, but it is an important one. Martin Luther King Jr., who gets a lot of mention in this documentary, advocated the same sort of approach. He was sternly outspoken against the oppression of African Americans, but he was even more stern on the fact that violence and hatred towards white people was not the answer to the problem. He advocated loving our enemies. As a result, he had more of an impact on the world than did most revolutionaries before his time. Another peaceful revolutionist, Gandhi, talked about being the change you want to see in the world. It's tempting to believe the lie that, with just the right amount of violence and oppression of your enemies, you can stop the violence and oppression you are experiencing at the hands of your enemies. But you don't need to be a very deep thinker to see how dealing with your enemies in this way only ends up turning us into the very system of oppression that we claim to be fighting against. Or, as Gandhi put it, an eye for an eye makes the whole world blind. And then we have Jesus, who, after he had finished being tortured and was on the brink of death for a crime he didn't commit, said of his executioners, "God, forgive them. They don't know what they're doing." Now, it's pretty hard to torture and kill someone on a false pretense without really knowing what you're doing. But as a way of showing love for his enemies, Jesus chose to give them the benefit of the doubt. You see, we humans have a tendency to resist changing our behavior unless that change is coming as a result of our own inspiration. We have no problem choosing to change of our own initiative, but if someone else tries to get us to change, we stubbornly resist. Patience and understanding works around this. It lowers our enemies' defenses, and, even if only for a moment, our enemies cease to be our enemies, and they instead become our friends. That's why this teaching has the power to change the world, because we listen to our friends, we value their opinion, and it's pretty hard to hate them. So Jesus chose to believe that the people who hated him could change their ways, and in so doing, he gave them an opportunity to do exactly that. That was the approach Daryl Davis took towards his opponents as well, and a surprising number of them took advantage of that opportunity. Now, the world is still full of racists, bigots, terrorists, and enemies of all sorts. As much as Daryl Davis was liked by the people around him, he had plenty of people who did not like him, and who showed few signs of being willing to change on that. In a sad twist of irony, Some of Daryl Davis's strongest opponents were the ones you would have most expected to be his friends. 3 African American spokesmen for the Black Lives Matter movement. They hated Daryl because of the love he showed towards white supremacists as fellow human beings. Despite Daryl's testimony, they believed white supremacists were totally incapable of changing. One of them even admitted that his solution to the problem of racism in America was segregation. How ironic and how sad. Jesus experienced much the same thing when he showed compassion and understanding for non-Jews and pointed to them as examples of the sort of people God was looking for because of their sincere desire to show love to others. Jesus' own people, the Jews, the people Jesus came to set free from a world governed by hate and greed, they themselves hated him so much for this that they personally organized his torture and execution. It's inspiring to see our enemies turn into friends, but it's very depressing to see our friends turn into enemies as a result. This proclivity may never change. But regardless of that, the example we set through loving our enemies is something that sincere individuals of all backgrounds will recognize and follow if we are faithful with practicing it. There is a lot of tension between different religions and between atheists and theists, which is similar to that which exists between different races and racist organizations. We don't even know each other, and yet we hate each other with a passion simply because we disagree with what our opponent believes about the existence of God. Do you think that is a good reason to hate someone? I think that most of the time, we don't even understand our opponent's position, and so that needs to be our starting point. Atheists, do you know what a Christian actually believes? Or are you just believing what other atheists have told you because it fits in with your distaste for the Christian religion? And Christians, do you know what an atheist believes? Or are you just believing what other Christians have told you because it fits in with your belief that Christians are number 1 and everyone else is number 2? Most importantly, we need to recognize that just as every member of the KKK is a unique human being, Christians, atheists, and members of other religions are also individuals with their own beliefs and perspectives. You may be surprised at how many of them believe the same way you do on many different issues. And if we can find common ground on some of those things, who's to say we can't be friends and make this world a little more peaceful as a result? I want to hear your thoughts on what I've shared here about loving our enemies. Do you think we can learn from the example of people like Daryl Davis, Martin Luther King Jr., and Jesus of Nazareth? Have you had any experiences in which showing love and patience towards your opponent led to a positive outcome? Let me know in the comments below. Thank you for listening. Goodbye for now.